All right, it's a long one, so I'll just read it quickly. When to focus on each aspect of physical preparation. I'm talking about 3 energy systems and especially the development of cardiovascular fitness. Should you train all in one phase while focusing on one more than the other? Aerobic on Monday, lactic on Wednesday, et cetera, or train each system only based on the phase of the preparation that you are in? Go ahead and take this one because I kind of hit this one several times, and then I'll chime in on this one.
Sure. I'm a big fan of the concurrent approach when it comes to energy systems training. The best way I've seen it done and the best way I've been able to apply it is using a high-low system whereby you have a high day or, high intensity in inverted commas, your alactic, anaerobic work on one day, and you have your more aerobic based work on another day. You can develop both energy systems quite well by splitting them concurrently like this. And there are infinite different ways to structure programming around the high-low system, but for me, I like to keep it as simple as possible and try not to overload the athlete because you need to take into account the overall training volume. Especially pro fighters, you're looking at 12, 13, 15 training units per week. You can't expect to grind your athletes with too much high day work or alactic anaerobic work in a training week. So I like to keep it to a minimum and always balance it out with some aerobic work or active recovery work because at some point you need to down-regulate the nervous system. You cannot have these guys redlining throughout a camp. I'm sure you've seen examples of this, Phil, where just too much is too much. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah. I've done a whole YouTube video on this, on scheduling out your energy systems based upon the skills training, especially inside of camp, right? Because inside of camp, fatigue management is key. And skills training is more important on the hierarchy of like I said, an overall importance from a pyramid perspective. So with that, as far as your energy demands, I do use a high-low approach. That's why we work so well, me and Mac together, right? Similar views. With that being said, they are training these multi-bioenergetic demands throughout the entire week through the skills training. And most of the training is highly mid-intensity. It's lactic. So instead of me beating a dead horse, like I said before, is that I want to make sure that I'm giving them what they need from an alactic perspective so that we can increase repeated sprintability or repeated bouts of energy so that they can have power endurance throughout the entire fight, because that, let's face it, almost 85 to 90% of the fight is by that particular energy system, right? We are working on exploding and then recovering throughout the entire time of the fight. So, and with that being said, also, you have to make sure that you're not throwing the organism in 2 different directions. So integration of energy demands do come into play, especially because we have limited time with our athletes, right? So we have, primarily for me, only have 2 days a week with them inside the weight room. So yes, I need to make sure that I'm hitting that in a concurrent fashion, right? But it has to match the energy systems or the time frame of the particular weight room work. So again, we work in those 10-second intervals, right? So it's 10 seconds and lower. You're working that ATP production, right? And we're making sure that we're not going into any lactic, especially inside of camp, because absolute strength, speed, and power is going to be more important, especially getting closer to the fight, because obviously overall volume is going to go down, right? Now, on the off days when they're not in the weight room, yes, you want to do some, when you're talking about a high-low approach, we work on the more lower intensity days. So aerobic capacity, aerobic power, some tempo runs for restoration, right? And then also maintaining an aerobic capacity or an aerobic base, right?
So, I mean, at that point, developing the aerobic systems kind of shifts down the priority list and, increasing active recovery and down-regulating the nervous system moves up in the priority list just because of the intensity of those strength sessions.
When you get closer to the fight, capacities are going to be more important, right? So you have to have the ability to get to that particular, frame and sustain it, right? As opposed to working on alactic power or aerobic power, or I should say anaerobic power, or lactic power for better terms. Because of the fact that they're getting closer to the fight, they need to have to repeat bouts of energy, right? And again, like I said, this is the way the fight goes. This is the fight game. So they need to have that ability to have that power and have that power throughout the entire time.
Yeah, it's good. I think one of the most important things you pointed out there was respecting the hierarchy of needs. I think that has to, everything has to fit into that hierarchy of needs, whichever way you structure your training.
Yeah. And that's the thing. Like, you have to know the schedule. You have to know the schedule of the skills training so that you don't overload the system, right? So if you know your fighter is doing a hard wrestling session, then you need to back it down and give them some aerobic capacity or even some light aerobic power work, some tempo runs or some LSD work, nothing that's going to be too physically taxing, keeping the heart rate in zone 2, if anything, right? And making sure that we're getting that mitochondrial density, we're increasing that VO2 to an extent, and we're also making sure that we're getting blood flow, which is going to be key for recovery.
And just further to that, I've been going back over some of Lauren Landau's podcasts since he's going to be a guest of ours on this show. And one way he kind of quantifies the intensity of his fighters' training load or all the different training units throughout the training week, he uses a green, yellow, red system whereby he has the fighter map out their training week, with the schedule of all the different training units, be they strength sessions, conditioning sessions, or skill sessions, and he has the fighter rank each session: green for easy or low intensity, yellow for moderate, and red for high intensity, meaning super difficult sessions are red. And from there, Lauren Landau is able to kind of help restructure things where necessary. On one of these podcast episodes I listened to, he said, when he was very new to the MMA game, working with MMA fighters, he had a couple of fighters use this system, map out their entire training week, and he said one guy out of 16 sessions, 14 sessions were in the red. And that's where the alarm bells went off, and he kind of started this whole pathway to where he is today, working with everyone over there in Colorado. Just about everyone in the state of Colorado in MMA works with Lauren Landau in some capacity. So he's been incredibly successful over there, and I guess simple systems like this can often be the most effective, just in terms of the fighter's perception of what they're doing. And I think it's very effective. I haven't used this particular system myself, but just through conversations with a couple of my fighters, I've been able to ascertain where the needs are, where we need to turn down the intensity, where we need to perhaps add in some active recovery, where we need to focus on things like FRC and joint integrity and things like this to, as I mentioned before, down-regulate the nervous system, because fighters by nature are a different kind of animal to regular people. They want to push. They always want to be doing more. They want to get that 1% and 2% advantage over their opponent. They want to really push, grind. The harder you work, the bigger the reward. Well, oftentimes with human physiology, that's not the case. So we need to be really aware of this, of the personality type, and try and help trim back where we can, so that the fighter's not overdoing things and redlining. And as I mentioned before, I've seen plenty of examples of fighters redlining. Myself, my one and only MMA fight, I pushed way too hard leading up to the fight. I think 2 weeks out, I was training 7 days a week and trained all 6 days leading up to the fight. And I got sick. I got really badly sick. I got a real nasty chest infection. And I fought anyway. I had no gas in the tank. I was terrified that I was going to get my ass kicked because I was so sick, but I fought anyway. and lost by decision. But there's an example of doing things completely the wrong way. It's something I'll always regret, but it's a lesson. It's a lesson that I learned personally, and I can help steer other fighters away from.